Okay, and we are back. So the basic goal by the end of this section is that we're hoping that everyone will be able to understand enough about how to write metadata records that you'll be able to immediately start writing your own metadata records and be able to submit the metadata records. The eventual, what happens is that after you write, eventually it ends up over to me, and I will and discuss with you in great detail exactly how you did, if there's any information missing, if there's, well, mostly if there's any information missing, because in a lot of cases, if you did something wrong with your tags, I can usually just fix it on my end and tell you about it. But in most cases, it's basically missing information in the wrong places, stuff like that. So, once you have a draft of a metadata record as complete as you can possibly get it, it's not going to go out in public without me looking it over. And so when it does get out into public, it's in really good shape. And what we do with the data and the metadata, we put it together. We put it on the DISL metadata archive, which I'll be showing you in a minute. And we also submit it to a national repository. Our default is the NOAA and CEI. And from there, people can download these data sets and use them for whatever they need. Okay, so third section, resources at DISL data management for writing metadata to the ISO 19115 standard. All right, here we go. So right away, we're going to go to the DISL data management website. Okay, so the DISL website is www.disl.org. In order to find the data management section of the website, you would go to, and this scroll thing at the top is on all of the pages, but you go to Our Research, and then Data Management Center, right here, which will then lead you to this page here. The Data Management Center website is, starts out with introductory information about who we are, what we do, what our mission statement is, the advisory committee, what kinds of things we can do. The one at the bottom is going to be important. This is the data management policy, which is basically the governing document for what happens to data sets that are collected by people doing things while at DISL, because the Mobile Bay NEP is part of DISL. This document also applies to NEP data sets, and everyone who is funded by the NEP, has to also abide by the same policy. The wording for it is kind of directed at the faculty here, so it's kind of very academia oriented. But the important parts is basically you want to have your metadata written and your data sets, and when you're doing your final reports, basically you want to compile all of those at the same time while you have everything. While you know everything about your project and it's all fresh in your mind, it's the best time to write the metadata and get your data sets organized. But you want to do it before 2 years after project completion. So that's basically, let me see if I can actually highlight with this mouse. Within 2 years of project completion, yeah. So you turn in your final report, you'll have up to 2 years to get all the metadata and data sets organized and submitted to the Data Management Center. 2 years is actually it's a fairly generous amount of time, but you do want to get it done as fast as possible because, eventually you'll want to roll off to do other projects and it might, take you a while to get back to it. So it's just good to do it as early as possible. And then here's some stuff about what the Data Management Center does, which includes, guidance and training and, things like this webinar. As you start writing your own data sets, you can contact me and ask questions about specific details, and I will try to help you as much as I can. And obviously, this website will include a lot of the same information as we're covering in this webinar also. Okay, so here's, under Data Management Center, we have 2 tabs. There's metadata and data sets. Data sets, I'll just open real quick because this is basically the link to our search archive for the metadata records. and you can search on the faculty member. If you want to look for NEP data sets, you can just click that, and then just go like that, search, and here's all of the ones that are associated with NEP. But there's actually more than that. Like the Mobile Bay monitoring system has its own separate, I think it's under Renee Colini right now, but okay, no, it's not. Anyway, yeah, so you can look around and find, he's not in here anymore. These are basically all of our present and past faculty, people who have labs that generate data sets. You can also just click all, and it'll just give you a list of everything we have. There's about, I think, 100 data sets in here at this point. Most of them are fairly recent. We also have, legacy data sets from earlier than that. You can search by theme, you can search by place. You can search by Mobile Bay, it will give you a lot of things. Yeah. These are all the ones that are related to Mobile Bay. Okay, I need pretty much all of it. So 52 of them. Okay, so anyway, so that's the search archive, and that's where, let me just show you the NEP. So the example that I was going over this morning is this one right here, historical submerged aquatic vegetation. If you click that, you can get the part of the abstract. And you click the metadata, it'll open a new window with the actual data set. And as you are writing your own metadata records, it's useful to be able to have completed records to look at for examples, because you can open it and then you can do the view source thing and to see what the XML tags look like and see how they set theirs up to make it so that, what this nice clean thing looks like compared to what the XML code looks like that made it look like that. I'm going to close out a few of these things because all right. So anyway, okay. Then the other one, metadata, is basically educational information for the most part. Like, what is metadata? Why is it important? What is it, the formatting for what it looks like when it's for a science data set specifically. There's basically two broad, there's the main document that includes your description, your title, your abstract, your purpose. And then the second part is the dataset characteristics, which is, your table column headings. And those are two separate documents in ISO. And then there's more information about metadata at DISL. This is one of the locations where you can get links to all the stuff I've mentioned up to this point. For example, that color-coded Google Doc template is this link here. There's also alternative places you can write metadata besides our tool. This is the tool that I'm going to be going over in great detail in a minute. And then we have a list of specific guidelines for what kind of information we want in our records. So the file identifier has to be a certain way. Here's a definition of what is the difference between an abstract and the purpose, because a lot of people find that a bit confusing. Date, time, location. In the ISO record, it has to be specifically formatted. They want decimal degrees for latitude, longitude. They want the dates and times has to be formatted in a certain way. In your actual data set, it doesn't have to look like that, but in the metadata record, it does. So there's a difference there. And then, we want all of our metadata records to include DISL, because as these things get submitted to national repositories, if we want to be able to find all of our own records, we want to be able to search on ourselves and find our stuff. When you cite stuff, be sure to include a full citation. Dataset items. In the main document, there's a data quality and methodology section that explains your sequence of processing steps. If you mention something that you did in there, it has to also be in the feature catalog. There's no point in going into great detail about how you measured soil samples in such and such a way, and then your actual data set only includes water column data or something like that. So if it's mentioned, because what happens is that a lot of people will just copy their method section from their project report, and if you just copy paste it that way, it doesn't always match what's in the data set itself. So you have to do some editing, read it over, make sure that if you, mention like such and such information is found in figure 2, and figure 2 is not in the data set, and you either need to remove that reference or you need to add figure 2 as a browse graphic. So, just make sure it all matches up. and you're not referring to things that are not going to be found in your data set or elsewhere in the metadata. Browse graphics I talked about before. You want to basically map your study area is the most common thing. Right. And then finally, we have a section for science software, which is going to be section 4 of this little workshop. I'll go into more detail about that. So yeah, basically, if you read all this stuff, you'll get basically the same amount of information as what we're going over today. Is that all I wanted to say? Okay. So yeah, so that's the website, and here's how you reach. Go to www.disl.org. In the top tabs, there's our research, and then there's Data Management Center, which is the third one.
And of course, we provided those links in the email invite for this, so keep a hold on those. And when we get the videos and information uploaded to our website again, we'll have easy access links back to these resources.
Okay, and this is basically a summary slide of the data management policy. I mean, there's two basic philosophical thingies that explains why we're doing it the way we want to do it. All the NEP money is also basically public money, so everything that is funded by public money should be available to the public, and that's kind of what the whole point of all of this is, because you can't just put your data set out in public and have everyone understand it and be able to use it. You have to document it and make it organized in such a way that it's going to make sense to other people besides yourselves. Because when you're doing a project, you know exactly what everything is and where everything is, but no one else is going to understand that unless you explain it, and that's what the metadata is for. Also, we believe that anything that is done at DISL should be available from DISL, and that seems to be pretty basic, but up to this point we've been putting most of our stuff at the NCI, and we're going to be working on making DISL data more centralized at DISL. And in the policy, as I said before, we wanted basically 2 years from the time you're done with the project. We want to have all of your stuff. Okay, so metadata at DISL, and I think I just covered that already. The Dataset Archives, that's the metadata archives at Popley. And then the bottom is where we're going to be spending a large amount of time. So let's go there. And let me actually have several copies of this running at this moment. All right, anyway, this one is linked to the let me just go back over this. Okay, so metadata at DISL. So the generator that I'm about to show you in great detail is over here. It's under metadata at DISL. It's in the metadata section. This thing. Okay. So this is basically, you can just read through. If you don't know anything at all about metadata, you can just start by reading it from the top and follow along to the steps in the order that you're doing, in the order that is presented. Step 1 is organizing your data. Before you can even get to writing metadata about your data set, the data set has to be organized in a way that can be understood by somebody else. Generally speaking, if you are writing your metadata, you'll have your data set organized as well as you think it should be, but then as you're writing your metadata, in a lot of cases you'll find out that your data set could be organized better and be more concise. And so it kind of, in a lot of cases, it goes hand in hand. You'll write your metadata and you'll organize your data pretty much at the same time. And by the time you're done doing both of those things, and everything looks really great. So things to keep in mind while you're organizing your data. These are the suggestions at the top, are things that you're going to have to define in your metadata at some point. So, and a lot of this it looks like it's really basic information that is extremely obvious to you, but a lot of people don't have all of this information organized in one place. And so gathering together all of this information can take some time. Like if, like your study area, station locations, for example, you have latitude, longitude for everything, but you don't actually have it all in one as an actual list somewhere. It might be scattered over your email while you're talking to your colleagues. Units for every number, like, did you measure something in feet or meter? Did you do temperature as Celsius or Fahrenheit? So it seems like it would be really obvious, but a lot of people don't automatically record that information, so you have to sometimes do some digging to figure out what you did. If you have, especially with the more, like if you're measuring light penetration, for example, and it's something like micro Einsteins per square meters per second or something like that. You want to look up all of that. Scientific names, a lot of people will just use common names while they're going about the study, but eventually you're going to need to know the Latin names, the genus, species. If you're using weather codes, for example, it's pretty common sometimes. People will go out on a boat and they'll note the weather, and there will be a code between 1 and 12 or whatever. And each of those codes means something, like clear skies, thunderstorms, fog. NOAA will have that list somewhere on a website, and you just have to know where that list is so that you can refer to it, so that people can look it up. If you have complex methodologies like processing in your lab, you want to be able to explain all of that in detail. If you have it in your final report, a lot of that can be copy pasted from final reports or from peer-reviewed journal articles if that's where you're submitting. In other cases, there might be a specific protocol that you're doing that the EPA has published, for example, and then you just look up where that protocol is located on the web and have a link to it. If it has a DOI, that's even better. And also, while you're looking at your methodology, you want to make sure that you explain them in a way that's not going to be time current. For example, if you look back on how things were done back in 1980, before they did a lot of stuff with computers, there's certain field collection methodologies that they used that made perfect sense to them back then for what they were doing, and so they just abbreviated what they did. And now when you're looking at it in 2017, you might have no idea what that was, because the sensors were different, the instrumentation was different, and they work in a different way. So keep that in mind too. Be sure to explain all of that. And you want to make sure that you're not being too specific to specific pieces of software. There's open source ways. When we submit things to NOAA and CEI, they want everything to be open source. So instead of using Microsoft Excel, it's going to eventually, they convert it into text files, just flat text files that anything can open, because Microsoft Excel might not still be around in 30 years, If it's images, you want it to be shape files, and you want it to be TIFFs. I know that a lot of you who do work with very large imagery, you tend to use something called Mr. SID, for example, and it works great when you're doing your study because it's a lot smaller, but when you're wanting to preserve it long term, you're going to need to turn it into TIFF files, and we realize that it can get very large, but it's the higher the resolution it is, the more useful it will be to future people who want to use the data set for something that they're doing. If the data set is lots of files, if it's it's a very large data set and you have multiple, you want to also include another file, a README file that explains just a list of the files, what this file is, what it's for, how it relates to all the other files. You can just make a readme.txt. File data organization. If you're doing a table in an Excel spreadsheet, when how it looks in the Excel spreadsheet is not going to necessarily translate to how it looks as a text file. So if you have color coding, you want to keep that in mind, because color coding translated into a comma delimited text file is not really going to, you're going to lose that information. So you might want to organize your data in a different way than using color coding. If you are submitting an Excel workbook, you know, make sure that at the time that you save the file, it's in a place that is going to make sense when somebody else opens it. Because what Excel does is it will save the last position of your cursor in whatever spreadsheet you were looking at. So if you have lots of them and you turn it into like panes or something, and your cursor is on AZ 229 and it's in the middle of nowhere, you know, and the next person that opens that file is going to open it in that same spot and not have any idea what they're looking at. So you want to make sure that you scroll all the way back up to the top, put your cursor in A1, and then spreadsheets, make sure that the spreadsheet you want them to see first is the one that you're at when you hit save on the file before you submit it. That's what that's about. Okay, so then once you got all of that done, so there's two sections, to a metadata record. There's the catalog, which is basically the dataset characteristics, and sometimes it helps to do that first. And also, in the way it works in DISL, you actually make the feature catalog as a separate file and then reference it in the main document. So it helps to have the feature catalog done first so you can reference it. You know, it depends on your data set. If you don't have a feature catalog, you can just skip that section. But let me explain in detail what a feature catalog is. Now, I actually have an example down here. It's an Excel file that more or less matches the example that I've got in step 2. So, you suppose you have a workbook with 3 spreadsheets. 2 of them have 3 columns of data that are like size, weight, and color, and then you have a 3rd spreadsheet that's like date, time, latitude, longitude, stuff like that. And I actually created a spreadsheet that looks like that. So we have 2 spreadsheets that have size, weight, and color. All of this data is completely fictitious, by the way. I made it up on the fly. And then you have a 3rd spreadsheet that has latitude, longitude, date, time. Now, if this was a real data set, then you would have some way of referencing all of this information in the other 2 spreadsheets. So there would actually be a 4th column, but we're not going to worry about that. So because these 2 are set up the same way, it's just that they're different species, but it's still the same information. You're still getting the same basic types of data for them. You could call these the same feature type because you can write one document that explains what both of them are. And then because this one is set up differently, it would be a second feature type. That's not the right one. Okay. So you have one feature catalog to explain your entire workbook. You have 2 feature types that explains what the setups of the types of spreadsheets. You have 3 spreadsheets, but they're 2 different ways. And then each column of data is called an attribute. So in this case, all of these column headings at the top, each one is called an attribute. Latitude, longitude, date, time, whatever. Each of the attributes, there's 2 types of attributes. You can either have categorical data or you can have numbers. So latitude, longitude, these are numbers. Date is actually a number. Time is a number, sort of. But then you have something like season, which is spring, summer, fall, winter, and these are categories. Colors are also categories. In this case, it's actually the species, but red, blue, green, yellow, pink, vermilion, gray, pink, brown, white are some shrimp colors. So those are going to be treated differently in the document. So for this particular, there's actually not that many feature catalog tools out there. I think mine is really the only one, which is kind of sad because I think more people need to be able to write these things. Anyway, so what you need to do is you look, after you've got your data set organized, you want to count the number of categories that are in each of your categorical attributes. So for example, if you have season, you have spring, summer, fall, winter is 4 of them. Then you have color, red, blue, green, yellow, orange, pink, and purple. That's 7 of them. And you want to count which one has the most number of categories, because how the tool is set up is that it will make the number of form blanks that you need to do all of your categories, but you don't want to have millions of them, so you specify how many you want, and it will give you that many. If you have, otherwise, I'd have to like make something that puts in 100 of them, and then the form gets extremely long and unwieldy. Okay, so I filled in, so this is pre-populated with the example. If you hit reset, it will put these numbers back in. You can then change these to whatever your actual numbers are. And then when you're done, you go to Feature Catalog Generator. And you get a bunch of form blanks. And there's helpful information about what kind of information should go into each of these blanks. The Feature Catalog title. Okay, so Dataset title and a Feature Catalog title, and they should not be exactly the same because they're different documents. So the data set might be Historical Submerged Aquatic Vegetation from 1940 to 1966. The feature catalog, if this is one, complete study and you don't have like follow-up studies or anything, or a larger, broader program that is part of or anything like that, you might just say Historical Submerged Aquatic Vegetation 1940 to 1966 - feature catalog, and that would make it different from the data set title. The scope, if it's just a small data set off of just a one-off small study, you can just repeat the keywords in that spot. Scope can be used, I think that's what most people do with it, but you can also use it to explain, a particular way that your lab organizes all of your data sets for a particular type of study that you do repeatedly for many different types of funding agencies over many years. Okay, and then the date. Creation date means when did you create this catalog. Revision means that if you did one study 1 year and then you added more things that you measured in your follow-up study, it could be a revision that includes all of the new information. Publication is publication mostly to refer to historical archive type data, where everything has been done. It was done 30 years ago. Everyone involved in it has moved on or has, can't be found anymore and can't be contacted. And so publication is, when they actually put it out into the public, whether they put it on a website or put it into a final report of some sort, or publish it in an academic journal. Contact information for the feature catalog is for whoever wrote the feature catalog. It's pre-populated. You can delete parts that don't apply to you. You put down your name. And resource provider is, where basically somebody is looking this up. How is this person related to the data set? Resource provider is the default. You can change that if you're somebody else. If you're the principal investigator, for example. You can say originator if you don't want to call yourself a principal investigator. Distributor if you're the repository, Okay, so anyway, so if you recall from the previous page, we had 2 feature types. So the way this is organized is you have feature type 1 will give you a bunch of boxes, and it'll give you the number of attributes that you specify. You fold it. And for each of the attributes, if it's a categorical thing, you expand it, and it will give you the number of blanks that you asked for. So we asked for 7 of them, so there should be 7. And this expands and collapses just to make the form a little shorter. So attribute 1 has 3 different things. So or feature type 1 had 3 different things. So you have attribute 1, 2, and 3. So in the first one, you would fill out, size and then weight. And I'll just go and do that. The description field is actually optional if it's extremely obvious, but you definitely want to specify what units things are in. So the millimeters. weight, kilogram, color. If you leave these things blank, it just won't show up anywhere in the final document. If you need it, it's there. If you don't need it, just leave it blank. So we have, for example, red. I don't think we actually had blue, but I'm going to put it anyway. The label is the important one. Code means something like if you have an abbreviation, you could use the code space for that. And then definition, if it's something that actually needs a definition. For example, if you're filling in seasons, let's fill in seasons. Like spring, you might want to say spring is the month of March, April, and May, you know, and then summer, and so on. You know, not every categorical attribute is going to have all of these blanks, so you just use the number of blanks that you need and just leave the rest of them blank, and the rest of the blank ones will not show up. And you get to the second one, which is basically set up the same way, and you'll have, if you have more than 2 of them, it'll just keep going, you know, feature type 1, feature type 2, use all the attributes, and it'll match exactly the number of attributes you ask for. If you turn out to find out that you actually need more blanks, there's ways to copy paste the code directly to give yourself more blanks. So sometimes you will miscount, like you say that you have 32 columns of stuff, but there's actually 33 of them. Or, you know, as you're moving along, you'll find out that you can actually combine, sometimes you can combine columns because they're all extremely similar to each other. And you could, like, say columns 20 through 25 are actually all basically the same thing, and just put it all into one attribute. And then you just specify, you know, columns 21 to 25 are this. So sometimes you'll get fewer of them. But if you do it that way, the attributes that are blank have to be deleted. Now we'll show you that right now. So once you're done filling it all out, you go to Generate Feature Catalog. It'll take you to this page. Unfortunately, you can't really display raw XML to a website directly. I think there are some browsers that can do it, and some of them can't. So just to get around all of that, I have it set up in such a way that you could no, you can't, because okay, so Internet Explorer apparently doesn't do this very well. Let me go backwards. Because I think there must be a view source to Internet Explorer, but I don't know where it is. So we're going to do it again over here. So feature catalog title. No, that's all right. Yeah, because it's dynamically generated. When in doubt, I'll just go up to the very top and navigate your way back to it. Internet Explorer does not, for some reason, have a view source button. I don't know where it is. So you kind of need that. So, you know, use Chrome or Firefox. Both of those will work. I think Safari works also if you're using a Mac. Did we lose our internet connection? No. Let me just go farther back. Should work. Occasionally, DISL will actually disappear because the bandwidth to the island is kind of limited. All right, so here we are again, feature catalog. We're sticking with the defaults for the example. Type 1 is we'll go about the individual species. Okay, so then we have size. Grams, right? Hold on, let's send this. Some of it because you guys probably get the idea. So, because March, April, May. Where? Winter. We'll skip the second one for now. Alright. So generate future catalog. We get to this page. There's a link to the color-coded template if you need to modify it. So, for example, if you have too many featured or too many attributes or not enough attributes. Anyway, so if you right-click on this page, there will be a button somewhere that says View Source, assuming that you're using either Chrome or Firefox or Safari. And this will show you the XML version of the. And so the XML is basically your feature catalog document. Assuming that if you everything you need to do with it, you can just copy paste this whole thing. We'll start here. We'll go all the way down to the bottom. Copy it, turn it into Notepad, and then save it as whatever you want to call it. Which something like the name of your data set, like Mobile Bay NEP dataset number 1 or whatever. Catalog. And then you can just turn it in as is. If you need to edit anything, you will have to mess with the code a bit, and that's why we went into so much detail earlier about XML. So, for example, if you have too many, go look for a spot. All right, so here we go. So if you can see, for example, here we fill out seasons, and it was supposed to be a definition, but I left it blank. You could just put your cursor in between here and write down your description. Here's the listed values: spring, summer, fall, and winter. If you didn't include a definition, it's just not going to include that in the metadata XML. If you need it, you can always just go up here, copy it, and then in your Notepad or text editor, you can then just paste it underneath the label. You want to make sure that it's in the right order. So this is the label part. This is the definition part. So down here, the label part here, you want to put it between this tag and this tag, so it's in the right spot. If you need code, there's no examples in here that have code, but the code is between the label and the definition. Then we have a whole bunch here that was blank. So if you had extra and you want to just, it'll give you the blanks for it, but if you didn't fill it in, it'll still be there. You can go through and delete all the ones that you don't need. If you have extra ones, you have more table columns than you thought you did when you set up the generator, you would copy from carrier of characteristics to close carrier of characteristics, and then put all of your information about the other ones in there. Am I making sense? I'm looking at you because you're the only one I can see. All right. Let's see. Okay. So the feature catalog, this one doesn't have one. I think I'm going to have to find something that does. No, that's not it. That's my mail. Never mind. That's not it either. Okay, yeah, this will work. I just lost track of what I was going to say. Okay, so yeah, anyway, I was going to go show you something that has a feature catalog included. So let's go here again. Mobile Bay NEP. I'm pretty sure the 2015 set. Actually, this one's going to be a big aggregate because there was 3 different. Oh, guess what? I'm using IE. It doesn't show XML. The feature catalog information is apparently pretty close to the top. All right. So here's the feature catalog section of this metadata record. You know, it's supposed to be a separate file to be completely valid for the standard, but when we display it on our website, we just put the feature catalog section underneath the main document into a single file. So here's the bottom of the main document with the process steps, and then the feature catalog starts here. The title it actually matches the main document, but it says dash feature catalog to give it a different name. Here's a bunch of keywords. Responsible party, we've been putting in the director for an NEP program. And then here's your first feature type, your name, the definition. Some of this stuff you can pretty much ignore. The aliases section, I think that's in the form. Yeah, okay. Let me go back here. So if you go to a feature type, there's a second that says alternate name. That's what the alias is about. And so, you know, you can use this space, for example, if you have an Excel spreadsheet with multiple, or a Excel workbook with multiple spreadsheets, and each of the spreadsheets has a shortened name, you know, you could include that, or it could be a file name, so that, you know, something that's kind of abbreviated, and in the actual type name, you want it to be spelled out so people can understand what it is. So that's what that's for. Then as you keep going down, carrier of characteristics means the individual attributes. So here's a name, here's a definition, name. This one has categories, so like this was in a shape file, so feature geometry. You know, there's two types. There's points or polygons. You could define that in more detail if you need to. It just kind of goes and just gives you the whole list of all of them. And then here's the piece going. So this is what it looks like. Then here's, you know, after you get to the first feature type, here's the second one. Basically just goes all the way down like that. Okay, so does anyone have any questions before I keep going here? All right, well, I'm going to keep going then. Okay, so after you got your feature catalog information where you described the dataset characteristics, and usually while you're doing this part is when your data is going to just automatically organize itself as you're going along. Then you get to the main document, and it's another series of blanks asking for different types of information. If you go to the website file identifier, we want it to be in a specific format. We want it to start with DISL, the name of the lab, and then like if somebody, in our case, you know, it's a faculty member is the PI in the lab, and then the lab member might be a graduate student or a postdoc that's in that lab. The lab number, or not the lab number, the record number. If this is the first one they've done, it would be 001. If they've done more than one, it counts up. The year the metadata record was completed, so we know when the metadata record was written, because that's important to keep track of when we're curating this stuff later. Then you want to give it a title. The date of the data set, this is not the date. The date here is not the date of the metadata record. It's the date that you completed the data set. So it might be the last day of field collection, for example, would be a data set date for creation. If it's a published data set, you know, you want to put in the date that it was published. Abstract, you want to put in information about the data set, the purpose. Lab credit is, for example, you have field assistants that you want to credit. You can put that in there. We have it listed as faculty members and students because that's what most of DISL does. In the case of Lower Bain NEP, you would put in Roberta Swan, director. And then down here, you're going to have to edit some of this, I think, because this is set up in such a way that this is the principal investigator and this is an originator. So you have to go back through and edit the role codes to reflect what it actually is. So for example, if it's an NEP data set, it would be custodian is what we're using for Roberta. And then for the principal investigator, which is the person who actually did the study, is the principal investigator. Or it's a data originator, depending on what they did and how much they did, basically. Status, in most cases, it'll be a complete data set. Maintenance, this is the browse graphics. You'll have a file name, a format. The description will be the caption of the study area. You want to explain what everything on the study area map looks like. Workplace keywords, topics. There's actually a set list of these things. These are actually the most common that we run across at DISL. There's a link here that will take you to the full list, which has a whole lot of other stuff that we don't generally do. But if you want to see it, it's over there. And every once in a while, we run into something that is actually on that other list, and you want to add to it. But you have to have at least one. You can hold down the Shift key or the Control key to get more than one. If more than one thing applies. For anything that's estuarine, we want to include both inland waters and oceans because it's kind of both. And if you want people to be able to find the data sets, having it, they can search on either inland waters or oceans and still get our data sets. So, and IOTA, that's probably the third most common thing we use. Edit the constraints. This is basically acknowledging the funding agencies that funded the study. So DISL is always going to be in there because it's all DISL data. MBNEP will have to be one of them, and then if you had, there won't be any other funding agencies besides those two.
It certainly could be. We could have some outside resources.
Outside resources, and then if you want to acknowledge yourself in anytime somebody uses a data set, you could put yourself in there too, your organization, rather not you personally necessarily, but so in the case of DISL, we sometimes include the name of the lab that the study came out of. So same thing. Data set date range. This is the time frame of the study. Beginning and end is the most common, so that's how it's set up. As I mentioned before, if it's something different from having a known beginning and known ending, there are ways to do that. The geographic range, the bounding box, it's a rectangular box in this case. And then over here you can talk about, you can cite the final report. If it's on the NEP website already in their library section, you can refer to it there. There's a place to put down the web link. If it's a journal article, you would put it up in this section. If it's a book or report, you want to put it down here. If there's anything that isn't covered by these other blanks, you can add more information in this box. In most cases, nowadays, it will be a digital document or a digital image or a digital map, usually a digital document. If the data set is already uploaded to some other location, you would fill out information about those places. There's several boxes for that. You can add more than 5 if you add more than 5. You have to edit the XML for it. And then here's some sort of a template for methodology. There's several ways you can do it depending on how complicated your methods were. You can either just fill out the top box with an overview and just do that one box by itself, or you can ignore the top box and fill out details in several steps. You can have more than 5. Again, you can just copy paste the code for it. You can do both, have an overview of generally what we did and then the specific breakdowns what we did. So just fill out these boxes. There's lots of different ways. I mean, really, writing metadata records is a bit of an art form in some ways, because what kind of information you want to provide is not always going to fit perfectly into any specific template. So, and then here's where you cite the feature catalog that you did first. You include the title. This date and this title should match what is actually in your feature catalog. And then you list the feature types that are in the feature catalog. And the reason you do it this way is because if you have a broad program, you can have a feature catalog that includes many feature types, but a specific data set might only have 1 or 2 of those, and so you just list the ones that are specific to your data set. DS Aggregate Citation is basically, this is where you refer to other data sets that are related to your data set. Like, for example, if you have, if you're doing a repeated study over several years, and each year is a separate data set, this at the moment it's set up in such a way that it's referring to a parent. Like, you have daughter data sets that are all related to the same program. You can also refer to, sister data sets, I guess. But the way it's set up now, because mostly we just refer to parents. So anyway, so when you're done filling all that out, and also if you just kind of play around with it and figure out how it works, you don't have to fill out any of these blanks. You can hit generate metadata and get an example of the code. Of course, if you're using IE, which is what I'm doing, so I'm gonna go back to no. Generate document. Well, you go to the bottom. And do the same thing. You do the view source. This is a right click on the screen, and then just copy paste. It's from the top. And scroll all the way down to here. Take it into your text editor. You can use Notepad. There's WordPad will also work. Try not to use Microsoft Word, because Microsoft Word does a lot of formatting things that aren't compatible with straight text. They'll like turn quotes into smart quotes. They'll turn dashes into M dashes and things like that, and that can screw things up when you're trying to display it on the web later. So yeah, so Word is not the best choice usually, and sometimes it'll make like links and things too in weird places. Anyway, so yeah, so that's what. And then you can just go through the XML coding to figure out, for example, if you have more than 5 process steps, you could just copy this part of it and then fill out your additional information in this part of it here, in whatever order you need it to be in. So if it's something fairly simple and straightforward, the generator tool will be able to take care of it. You can just copy paste it, send it in, and you're done. If it's more complicated than that, you might need to do a bit of editing to add more fields or add more tags or delete things or whatever. So, okay. Are there any questions? This is pretty much the whole section. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a lot to digest there. So why don't we take a quick break, meet back here, and at 12:08 or 12:10, and then we'll wrap up this last part, and everybody can move along with their day. So stretch out, and we'll start back up here in a few.